Okay, so my biofuel was ethanol. Biofuels are liquid fuels and the blending of components produced by biomass materials called feedstocks. And most biofuels are used as transportation fuels, but they also may be used for electricity and heating generation. Ethanol is a type of biofuel that is renewable and can be made from various plant materials, collectively known as biomass. And the most common blend of ethanol is E10. E10 is the 10% ethanol and 90% gasoline, and it is approved for most gas-powered vehicles. How is it grown and cultivated? Most ethanol is made from plant starches and sugars, usually cornstarch in the US, but it can also be made from other grains such as sorghum, barley, sugar and sugarcane, and beets. Denaturants are added to ethanol, typically to make liquid ethanol undrinkable. And how is it produced? The common process for turning biomass into ethanol is called fermentation, and during the fermentation process, microorganisms such as yeast and bacteria metabolize plant sugars and produce ethanol. Development status of ethanol. Overall ethanol production was increasing over time, as we can see in the graph, but when the pandemic happened in 2020, ethanol production dropped, and currently it is still increasing, but it hasn't reached the pre-pandemic levels yet. The impact of ethanol on the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint serves to compare the total amount of greenhouse gases biofuels emitted from an activity or product, and basically it's the amount of carbon produced by an activity. Ethanol has a low carbon footprint compared to gasoline. It produces 4% fewer emissions of CO2 than gasoline, and the average ethanol emission rates for vehicles are 22% lower compared to gasoline. Economic impact of ethanol. Ethanol production creates jobs for people in rural areas where employment opportunities are needed, and according to the Renewable Fuels Association, ethanol production in 2021 accounted for more than 73,000 direct jobs across the country, $52.1 billion of the gross domestic product, and $28.7 billion in household income. Efforts to communicate the use of ethanol to the public. The government provides a variety of subsidies to increase the consumption of biofuels such as corn ethanol, and these subsidies usually include tax breaks, grants, loans, and loan guarantees. The government also imposes a mandate to blend biofuels into gasoline and diesel fuels. Biofuel supporters said that these policies would reduce gas prices, strengthen the economy, and benefit the environment, but none of these promises have really turned out to be true yet. And the ethanol has been blended into gasoline for over 40 years, which has improved air quality by reducing carbon and vehicle emissions. So my analysis of the situation and plan of action, based on my studies, ethanol seems to be helping the world in my opinion. And by combining it with gasoline for vehicles, we are improving air quality by reducing carbon and vehicle emissions. It is also providing many jobs for people in need in rural areas. And although the numbers are increasing, they are not as high as they were before the pandemic. So I think as long as we continue to produce and do what we're doing, we'll eventually reach those numbers. If funding weren't an issue, I would say we should build more dry mills for ethanol to be introduced. Dry milling is a process that grinds corn into flour and ferments it, which turns it into ethanol with co-products of distillers grains and carbon dioxide. And by building more dry mills, we will result in more jobs for people in rural areas, and ethanol will increase as a result, improving air quality by combining it with gasoline and reducing carbon emissions.